spend a lot of time looking for the one. And in my experience, the one is the mystery. And the mystery comes through different people. And different people are covered by their unconsciousness in different ways. And it's the same thing coming through. And that's the same thing that we love. So many bodies, one thing. Hello friends, John Dalton here, Further Emergence Podcast, where we go into love, consciousness, and the mystery. And in this episode, we're going into relationships, unnecessary suffering, and breaking up spiritual structures. Okay, I had a question come in response to the question I post on the Further Emergence Instagram feed. And the question is, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in your spiritual life at the moment? And this person says, currently being in a relationship with someone who does not have similar spiritual beliefs. I am very spiritual. My partner has no idea what he believes. Even after many years of being together, when I tried to get him to open up about what he believes, he just says he doesn't know. But he finds my belief in many things silly. I find it hard to believe that he cannot express his beliefs because he's a pilot, or he was a pilot, and he's a poet, yet he's clueless about his body, his place in the spirit and the spiritual world. He is a karmic partner and not my twin flame. I don't know how much longer I'll remain in this relationship, as I feel I've learned all my lessons from it. So, there's a lot there. The first thing that I kind of have to work backwards through it. The first thing that stands out is this idea of a karmic partner and a twin flame. Those are lovely ideas, but I found they can be a bit limiting. It's like the idea of the one, you can spend a lot of time looking for the one. And in my experience, the one is the mystery. And the mystery comes through different people. And different people are covered by their unconsciousness in different ways. And it's the same thing coming through. And that's the same thing that we love. So many bodies, one thing. So if you get sort of into the whole thing of like, I have to find the one, I haven't found that to be the case. I've found a lot of people sort of waiting with the big long kind of shopping list or a kind of projection of, similarly to what we do with ourselves, kind of going, there's an ideal version of me, and if I could just be that version, then everything would be great. Not just accepting and having compassion for who you actually are. We kind of project that onto the idea of the one. And it's like, oh, the one is this, a big shopping list of things. So, the idea of a twin flame, it's kind of similar to the idea of the one. The idea of a karmic partner is a nice way of saying this person's going to teach me things, drive me nuts. I'm going to have some hard lessons from this person. And that's the soul contract we have. But you could say that about everybody. Everybody's your karmic partner if in that way. So those kind of ideas, I think they get in the way. I think they limit. They sort of make us narrow and kind of, well, let's see now, are you my twin flame? Because if you're my twin flame, you can get away with a lot more than if you're my karmic partner. If you're karmic partner, it's like we've got a number of lessons to go through, and when we get through them, I'm out of here. Which isn't very loving, isn't very compassionate, and isn't really in it. You're not kind of in it. You've got an escape clause of like, they're not really my partner. I'm not really here for love. I'm really here for lessons, But there's loads of personal development courses you could go on that would do the same thing, I don't think it's fair to each other to think like that. So there's that. Then, the whole thing of like being with someone who doesn't have the same spiritual beliefs as you. I know that can feel very lonely. But then the spiritual life is kind of lonely because ultimately it's kind of you and between you and you. And like some of the aspects of religion is a sense of community. We share the same beliefs and we, read from the same book. And that can be lovely if that's your thing. And often what happens when you get into consciousness and the spiritual life, and that's not in the kind of religious context, it can be you can feel like you're on your own. And you want to have someone to talk to about things. And that's common. Like, I get that from a lot of people. And, there's kind of a thin line between whether that's to do with your relationship and what's going on in your relationship, or to do with your spiritual life and what's going on in your life and consciousness. It's hard to tell. Because if it's in your relationship, it could be bowling, you're really into bowling and your partner isn't, and you feel you can't talk to them about your bowling, You'd feel the same way. So you'd have to kind of pull that apart and kind of go, is this to do with there's just a bit of a mismatch going on here and it's a communication issue? Or is it that I'm in a different space? I'm in a completely different space. I see things so differently to the person I'm with all the time. We used to see things the same, but now my reality is very different. And their reality is bumping up against mine, and we've got friction between us that we never had before. And what does that mean? And what's going to happen? So I think with everything in relationship, whether it's your loving partner or your family or your kids or whatever, if you use love as your guiding light, go, what's the loving thing here? What's the truly loving thing to do here? And keep surrendering to that, then it's amazing how much gets sorted out in a loving way, not in a fractious, difficult, backstabbing, fighting, knockout, dragging each other around kind of way, but in a loving way. And you'll discover yourself doing things you never thought possible for love. And my experience anyway, when you do things for love and you do it from love, everything gets taken care of. Still difficult, but I wouldn't just go, we're not on the same page spiritually, and they're not opening up and they're not whatever. There's so many things you can do together. There's so many great resources, relationship resources. There's so many terrible resources as well, so of course you've got to be discerning. But there's so many great tools for communication between couples now that weren't around before, that you can keep shopping around and keep, the great thing is you can see lots of different kind of therapists online to help you with that now that you couldn't do it before. But, that's if you both want to go. I mean, you might say it to your partner and they're like, no, I don't want to go to a therapist. And then you're kind of like, because you might be going, oh, well, I'm going deeper into love here. But, and you feel like lots of things happening and lots of progress going on. But if you're in a rowboat with somebody and you have one oar and they have another oar and you're rowing like big time and it's really hard and, you can look, you're seeing movement. Yeah, okay, I'm really rowing. Then you look over and your partner's doing nothing. They're not even holding the oar. And you realize you've just been going around in a circle. That can be happening as well. So, partners, relationships, it's great for bringing up lots of stuff to do with what's going on with you in your spiritual life. Gives you an opportunity to surrender to love. There's no easy one answer fits all, except this thing of make love your focus. If you make love your North Star, and when I say like, what's the loving thing to do here? I mean, What's your inner nature saying to you? You know, we know. Like, you know, you're in a fight. You want to, you've come up, something pops into your head like, oh my God, if I say this, I'm going to win the fight. But you know it's not true to you. It's true what you're saying, but you know it'll really hurt them. And that's how you'll win the fight. You'll shut them up. The love, if you stay with the love, you don't say it, which can feel like you're going to explode on the inside, because you know if you say it, you're going to win. And that'll, you know, you'll win the argument, but you'll also know that you won't be being true to yourself. And that is hard when you do things that, you know, outwardly successful, inwardly you're rotting on the inside. So if you stay true to love, even though you lose all the arguments, it doesn't matter. You're with love, you're with your own sweet nature, and it all gets taken care of. Somebody sent me this meme. It's a quote from Annie Besant, who was a suffragette. She was quite involved in home rule in India back at the turn of the century kind of thing. Home rule for Ireland. So, you know, a great person. The quote, well, you'll hear. So the quote says, "Were everything around us smooth and easy, we would remain supine, lethargic, indifferent. It's the whip of pain, of suffering, of disappointment that drives us onward and brings out the forces of our internal life, which otherwise would remain undeveloped." So the person who sent me this said, "Hi John, when I see quotes like this, I just get a bit annoyed. We don't have to suffer!" An exclamation mark. "Something inside me thinks with awareness comes the ability to transcend any suffering. You don't have to suffer to grow. Always love your thoughts on the matter. Hope you're well. Green Ireland looks magnificent in your YouTube clips. Balm for the soul." So yeah, I think it sort of reminds me of the C.S. Lewis quote, you know, about that God is this big sculptor and we're like stones, and the blows of his hammer, while they hurt us so much, they make us perfect. And it's basically an old idea, but it's one that's still perpetuated. You know, like the whole idea of no pain, no gain. That's a big thing. And it's so popular, so prevalent, and a feeling of like we have to work for everything. So, here's how I see it. If you think of time being like a train, okay? And each carriage contains pain. And we have lots and lots of pain, and then we have an insight. And we look back along the train and go, well, it's full of pain. So the pain must have given me the insight. Which I have found not to be the case. So if we come around to the side of the train, we see that there are individual carriages. It's not continuous pain. Individual carriages with the break, with the gap between each carriage. And in my observation in myself and in other people, and you can check this yourself, we have pain, 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 pain. It gets excruciating. It gets so much. We builds up. We can't tolerate it anymore. And then something breaks. We break. We collapse. We go, that's it. I can't fight anymore. I can't. I'm on the floor here. I'm broken. Okay? And then an incredible kind of stillness comes in where there's no more fight, there's no more action, we're just on the floor. And then the insight comes in the stillness. And because our mind is involved, then we look along the train and go, oh, the pain led to the insight, but it didn't. What the pain led to was breaking. We break, and then we drop everything, and in the stillness, in that gap, that's where the insight comes from. So you don't need all the pain if you can just get to the gap, get to the stillness. That's kind of why everyone goes on about meditation, me included, because you can avoid so much pain. The other thing is, I draw a distinction between pain and suffering, because the sort of carriages are actually just full of suffering, okay? There is a certain amount of pain in the spiritual life. Of course, you know, when you're letting go of unconsciousness, when consciousness is transforming, it can be painful. It's kind of painful in the way that if you like spent the whole night clenching your fist, all night clenching your fist, 8 hours, when you went to unclench it in the morning, it would hurt. And we're a bit like that with pain. When we are letting go of something, when the unconsciousness is releasing, it's like that, you know, it's painful, okay? Which is different to suffering. Suffering loops, you know, it just goes round and around and around. And it builds in pressure, you know? Have you noticed the cycles that we go through in our lives, certainly in my life, in your life, where, you know, you have a difficult relationship, and then you work it out, and then you have another one and it's worse, and then you have another one and it's worse again, and it just gets worse and worse. The pressure builds and builds and builds and builds, a bit like the wind. And then you break. You're just like, I don't get it. What's going on? I can't seem to work out this relationship thing. And you're on the floor in the stillness of you're just staring at the wall, like, because you've tried everything. And then in that stillness, the insight comes. So the loop is suffering. And suffering you can avoid, you know. It's relatively easy to avoid suffering. Pain, you can't avoid it. So when it's pain, when it's new, all you can do is go through it. But suffering, you can avoid. And one of the ways you avoid suffering is not to glorify it. Not to go, oh, well, I'm not in a lot of pain. I mustn't be learning anything here. That's not true at all. That's not the way it works. And you'll notice that people who really believe in pain and that they can't grow unless they're in pain, they usually suffer a lot, because that's what they believe is what's supposed to happen. So that's what happens. So yeah, I mean, Annie, C.S. Lewis, you know, they're of their time, and you know, we've moved along. So you don't need to suffer. And the more still you become, and the more you focus on stillness, the less suffering you have to do. Still painful. Pain still is there. It's not like you get away with it, but you're not glorifying it, you're not looking for it. Because, like, pain is awful. No one would want to be in pain if they could avoid it. So, like, anything like I'm not even saying like the pain that comes when you're transforming unconsciousness is good pain. It's not. It's awful. If you ever had to let go of anything, you know, that you held on to very dearly, it hurts. It hurts a lot, and it's no fun, and it's not good pain or anything like that. I don't think there is good pain. I think it's just pain, suffering, awful, and then you get through it. So, yes. Focus on the stillness. It's very efficient, you know. You're getting right to the gap between the carriages of suffering. You get right to the gap, and then you get the insight with minimal pain, minimal or no suffering, if you can at all. Which is what I want for me and for everybody, and I'm sure you do too. So I had a response to the question I posted on Instagram, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in your spiritual life? And this person said, having one. So I wasn't sure whether they meant having a spiritual life or having challenges in their spiritual life. So I asked them if they could clarify, and they said, I was raised Irish Catholic and I abandoned that. I've always been drawn to nature, which has sustained me. I miss the ritual and community of Mass And pagan rituals seem contrived generally, although I love the community and fun of it. Maybe I'm just overly critical. So I love this kind of thing because when you're certain about your spiritual life, that's the most dangerous thing, I think. Because even though I can talk about this stuff, and I love talking about this stuff, I don't have anything rehearsed. I never know what I'm going to say. And every now and then I stall, but mostly not. Just kind of comes out. Same in the one-to-one work. I mean, I've lots of experience, I've lots of training. But when I'm working, it's not like, okay, I know what to do. I know how to fix this person. I'm always in this deep, confused, uncertain place. And it's very uncomfortable. I've got used to it, but it's not easy. Not a comfortable, feeling of, right, now I know what to do here. And I think it's the same in your spiritual life, or in my spiritual life anyway. I'm always like not sure about anything, which allows me to be very flexible and very fluid with what happens as things change. Because things are always changing, because like the consciousness is, I probably said it before, it's a bit like a light, and as the more conscious you become, the light gets a little bit higher and the circle that it casts on the ground gets a little bit bigger, which sounds lovely, doesn't it? But so you're let's say standing or sitting in the center of this beautiful light, and oh, look at all the things I'm conscious of. That's great. And then you get a little bit more conscious and the light goes up a little bit more and the circle of light gets a bit bigger. It's a bit like the tide going out, as you're uncovering all the old, prams and old bicycles and bed frames, and like, oh my God, this is what you've just become conscious of. And it's always at the edge, the leading edge of your consciousness. It's always uncomfortable and like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. I can't believe I used to think like that, or I used to see things like that. Now I can see things differently. And that happens enough times and you kind of go, wow, nothing is certain. I was so sure about this thing and now it's gone. Like this person was saying, yay, Catholicism, but then no. And then like, oh, pagan rituals, they sound good. Everyone's having a good time. Everything's great. But then it's like, no. That's, to me anyway, that's the spiritual life. That's the life in consciousness. It's always changing and there's no certainty. And if you feel certain, like I know something, that's not a, that's gonna bite you, that certainty, because life has got a great sense of humor, or the mystery's got a great sense of humor, whatever you want to call it. And as soon as you think you've arrived somewhere, it will demonstrate. It's done kindly, but it can seem brutal. A bit of a contradiction, which happens a lot in this kind of life and consciousness. It will just smash that up. And it's not even like it's doing it. It would be like, looking into a river going, oh, I've made this lovely boat. Let me put my boat in this lovely in the river, and the river will just like, it'll just wreck it, Like, oh, but my lovely boat. It's like, is the river trying to teach you a lesson? Nope, the river's just being the river. It just is going powerfully. And that's kind of what it's like, in my experience anyway, of the mystery. It's not trying to teach you lessons. It's not, this idea of like lessons. God, can we stop with that? It's so unhelpful, because, I wrote this meme a good while ago, for as long as you think life is teaching you lessons, you're always going to be in school. It's like, it's not how we are with our babies. We're not kind of, I'm going to teach you a lesson about crying, There was a time when that was popular, but thankfully not anymore. And it's the same with life. Life's not trying to teach you a lesson. It's just like the river, as I say. It's its thing. And you begin to get a sense of the river and not to build perfect little boats and put them in there, you know, because that's the nature of the river. So this person kind of going, the biggest challenge in my spiritual life is that I don't have a spiritual life. That's a very spiritual place to be, because there's nothing certain there. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm a this kind of person or that kind of person, you know. That's the danger of teachings, you know, the danger of gurus, of you know, taking everything that the person says as true and not going, is this true for me? I can hear it's true for them. It sounds great. I really want it to be true, but it doesn't really resonate with me. Because everybody, all the gurus, they're just people. They're just like you and me. We've got different amounts of unconsciousness, and like often people who end up on stage teaching, they have maybe not as much unconsciousness as other people, but they've still got it. That's why it always comes around to bite them, you know? They've always got their unconsciousness. So if you just go, whatever they say is the right thing, they're going to lead you astray. They won't mean to. They won't mean to at all, but they will, because they've got their unconsciousness, you know? Plus, the time of the guru is over, as I like saying. You know, it was about 20 years ago, it was still going. But not anymore, you know. There's too many of us. There's too many people who are at a kind of level of consciousness where they just don't need somebody up on a stage telling them what's going on. We just are in community now, you know. I think Thich Nhat Hanh said that, didn't he? He said the next Buddha will be the community. I think there's something in that, you know, that we're all just sort of helping each other home, as Ram Dass, like, you know, said, and that's a beautiful way of thinking of it. It's friendly, you know, friendly just to walk along together and have a chat. And I'm going, this is the way it looks to me. And you're going, well, this is the way it looks to me, in comments or whatever, you know. But it's just me and you, because it all goes on in you just like it all goes on in me. So this idea of a community like that you would get in a sort of structured teaching, it's nice, and you can talk about the same thing, but ultimately you're going to die on your own, you know. You're going to die alone. Even if you're surrounded by your loved ones, you're going to die alone. You're going to go through the death process alone, just like you go into the sleep process on your own. You go into deep dreamless sleep on your own. You go into the mystery on your own. So it makes sense to me to figure it out for yourself. You know, figure out what resonates for you and embody that. And when it's embodied, then you don't have to think about it, which is kind of what I was going to get at when I was saying I never plan what I'm going to say. You know, I just respond and it just comes out of me. And half the time I'm listening to what I'm saying going, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that was in there. Because it's embodied. And I've got no one to reference to. You know, I'm not kind of going, I mean, I've got stories about, you know, my spiritual teacher and that kind of thing, but everything I say is coming from inside me, you know. So that's quite a lonely, isolated place to be. But as I say, that's the spiritual life, because you have to do it on your own, ultimately. So this feeling of like, God, do I even have a spiritual life? I think that's probably a very spiritual thing to say. It's a very uncertain place to be, which is where all the juice is, all the good stuff is. And I think it's great. And you could tell by the lightness that the person was saying this in their communication, that I think they kind of got that as well. All right, well, that's all I have for you this time. I trust you're well. I trust you're of good cheer, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.